The richest test is the heart. These words echoed in Sultan Rashid's mind as he walked through the dusty streets of the humblest neighborhoods of his kingdom, disguised in the tattered clothes of a beggar. The midday sun fell mercilessly on the narrow streets of Marrakesh, and the heat made the air tremble as if reality itself was blurring before his eyes. No one could recognize him now. The man who ruled vast territories, whose coffers overflowed with gold and precious stones, whose name made kings and princes tremble, now walked hunched over, with an unshaven beard covered in dust, dressed in rags that any servant in his palace would have rejected. But this transformation was not a whim or a game. It was a necessity, born from the depths of his soul. 3 months ago, Sultan Rashid had lost his beloved wife, Sultana Amira, a woman whose kindness was legendary throughout the kingdom. She used to tell him, "Rashid, true wealth is not measured in gold coins, but in the purity of the human heart." For years, he had heard these words without truly understanding them, occupied as he was with matters of state, conquests, and diplomacy. But now, with her absence like an unbearable void in his chest, those words took on a new and urgent meaning. Amira had dedicated her life to helping the poor, visiting hospitals and orphanages, distributing food and medicine. When she fell ill on her deathbed, she took Rashid's hand and whispered, "Promise me you'll truly know your people, not from your golden throne, but from their streets. Only then will you understand what it really means to govern." Rashid had promised, with tears running down his cheeks, not knowing then how profoundly that promise would change his life. And so began his secret pilgrimage. For weeks, the Sultan had traveled his kingdom in disguise, observing, listening, learning. He had seen greed in the eyes of prosperous merchants who refused to give a coin to a beggar. He had witnessed the indifference of nobles who looked away from others' suffering. He had experienced rejection, insults, doors slammed in his face. Each experience was a painful lesson about human nature, and each night he returned to the palace with a heavier heart. But he had also found glimmers of light in the darkness. An old woman who shared her bread with him, though she barely had enough for herself. A child who offered him water from his canteen. These small acts of kindness were like stars in the night, reminding him that humanity was not completely lost. Today, however, would be different. Today, he would find something that would transform not only his understanding of the world, but his very soul. It was mid-afternoon when the Sultan arrived at one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, a labyrinth of alleyways where houses pressed against each other like crooked teeth. The smell of spices mixed with garbage floated in the air. Children played barefoot in the dirt, their laughter contrasting with the harshness of their environment. Women washed clothes in buckets of murky water, while men searched for work or gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices about life's difficulties. Rashid stopped at a corner, observing. His plan was simple but revealing. He would ask different people for help, pretending desperate need. He wanted to see who among the poorest still retained the capacity to give. He wanted to find that pure heart Amira always spoke of. He passed by a man selling dates at a small stand. "Please, sir," Rashid begged with a trembling voice. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. Could you give me a date?" The vendor looked at him with contempt. "Get out of here, vagrant. If I give to you, I'll have to give to all the beggars in the city. Leave before you scare away my customers." He kept walking, the rejection familiar, but no less painful. He approached a woman carrying a basket of vegetables. "Madam, please, anything you could give me." She quickened her pace without even looking at him, clutching her basket to her chest as if he were a thief. The sun was beginning to descend when Rashid reached a particularly narrow street. There, sitting on the steps of a small, deteriorated house, he saw a woman. She would be about 35 years old, though life's difficulties made her seem older. Her clothing was simple but clean, carefully mended in several places. Her face showed the lines of exhaustion, but her eyes had a light that Rashid recognized immediately. It was the same light he had seen in Amira's eyes, the light of someone who, despite everything, had not lost hope or kindness. A woman was counting coins in her lap, her expression concentrated and worried. Rashid could see there were very few coins, probably all she had in the world. Next to her, on the steps, was a small cloth bag and a cracked water jug. The Sultan approached slowly, hunching over even more, making his voice sound weak and desperate. "Madam," he said, stopping at a respectful distance, "forgive me for bothering you. I'm a traveler who has fallen on hard times. I've lost everything. My family, my home. I haven't eaten in days and have nowhere to sleep tonight. Could you help me with something? Anything. Even a few coins would allow me to buy a little bread." The woman looked up, and for a moment, her eyes met Rashid's. In that instant, the Sultan felt as if she could see through his disguise, as if she could see directly into his soul. But then she smiled, a sad but genuine smile, and looked at the coins in her lap. "Brother," she said in a soft but firm voice, "I see that fate has been cruel to you. But you're not alone in your suffering." She paused, counting the coins once more. "I have here 10 dirhams. It's all the money I have left in the world. Tomorrow, I must pay the rent on this house, and if I don't, my son and I will be thrown out into the street." Rashid felt a pang of guilt. He was about to apologize and leave when the woman continued speaking. "But looking at you, brother, I see that your need is greater than mine. At least I have a roof over my head tonight, and my son is healthy. You have nothing." With trembling but determined hands, the woman extended the 10 coins toward him. "Take this. May Allah protect you and guide you toward better days." The Sultan stood paralyzed, looking at the coins in the woman's outstretched palm. The world seemed to stop around him. The street noise faded. All that existed in that moment was that outstretched hand, those 10 coins that represented everything this woman possessed, and the purest act of generosity he had witnessed in his entire life. "Madam," he finally managed to say, his voice breaking with real emotion, "I cannot accept this. It's all you have. What will become of you and your son?" The woman smiled again, and this time her smile was wider, more luminous. "Allah will provide, brother. He always has. I've been through difficult times before and have always found a way to move forward. But you seem to have lost all hope. These coins may not solve all your problems, but at least they'll give you a hot meal and a place to rest tonight. And sometimes that's enough to remind us that it's worth continuing to fight." With trembling hands, Rashid accepted the coins. He felt that if he spoke, he would break down crying right there, revealing his identity. So he simply nodded, bringing the coins to his chest, as if they were the most valuable treasure in the world. And in that moment, for him, they were. "What's your name, brother?" the woman asked. "My name is Hassan," Rashid lied. Using his late father's name, "I'm Layla," she responded, "and that's my son, Omar." She pointed toward the open door of the house, where a boy about 8 years old watched them with large, curious eyes. "Omar, greet Mr. Hassan." The boy came out shyly. his bare feet making small sounds on the stone floor. He was thin, too thin, but his eyes shone with intelligence and life. "Salam alaikum," he said with a small bow. "Alaikum salam," Rashid responded, his heart breaking at seeing the boy's thinness, knowing this family barely had enough to eat. "Omar is learning to read," Layla said with evident pride in her voice. "A teacher from the neighborhood gives him lessons in exchange for me washing his clothes. He's very intelligent, my son. Someday he'll be someone important. I know it." Rashid looked at the boy, then at the mother, and felt something change inside him. Here, in this forgotten corner of his kingdom, he had found something all his gold couldn't buy: the true nobility of the human spirit. "Layla," he finally said, finding his voice, "may I ask you something? Why do you help me when you yourself have so little?" Layla was thoughtful for a moment, looking toward the sky that was beginning to tinge orange with sunset. "My mother used to tell me something when I was a girl," she began. "She said that every person we meet on our path is a test from Allah. Some come to test us with difficulties, others with temptations. But those who come needing help, those are the ones who test the true nature of our heart. And I want that when my life ends and I present myself before the Creator, He sees that my heart was generous, even when I had nothing to give." She paused, smiling softly. "Besides, Brother Hassan, I've been where you are now. 3 years ago, my husband died in an accident at the market. I was left alone with Omar, without money, without family to help me. I thought we would die of hunger. But then, an old woman who could barely walk shared her food with me. A carpenter gave me work cleaning his workshop. A baker started giving me the bread he didn't sell at the end of the day. Small acts of kindness from people who didn't have much either. Those acts saved my life and taught me that kindness is the only thing that really matters in this world." Rashid felt tears burning his eyes. "You're an extraordinary woman, Layla." "No, Brother Hassan, I'm just a woman who understands that we're all connected. Your suffering is my suffering. Your joy would be my joy. That's how the world should be." At that moment, Omar approached and tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mama, I'm hungry." Layla caressed her son's hair with infinite tenderness. "I know, my love. Let's go inside. We still have a little rice and some vegetables. I'll prepare dinner." Rashid watched as mother and son entered their humble home, and he stood there in the street, the 10 coins clutched in his fist, feeling the weight of something much more valuable than gold, the most important lesson of his life. That night, Sultan Rashid returned to the palace with a transformed heart. He didn't sleep. Instead, he spent the hours of darkness in his private study, writing, planning, thinking. Layla's words resonated in his mind like bells. Kindness is the only thing that really matters in this world. He called his most trusted vizier, a wise man named Ibrahim who had served his father before him. "Ibrahim," Rashid said when the old man entered, still drowsy from being awakened in the middle of the night. "I need you to help me with something of utmost importance, and it must remain in absolute secrecy." Ibrahim, accustomed to his sultan's unusual requests, especially since he had begun his disguised excursions, simply nodded. "Of course, my lord. What do you need?" "There's a woman in the Al-Qamar neighborhood. Her name is Layla. She has a son named Omar. I want you to investigate everything about her. I want to know her complete story, her needs, her dreams. But do it discreetly. She must not know we're investigating." Ibrahim frowned, curious. "May I ask why, my lord?" Rashid smiled, a genuine smile that Ibrahim hadn't seen on his sultan's face since the death of Sultana Amira. "Because today I met someone who taught me more about governing than all the philosophy and politics books I've read in my life. and I want to reward her in a way that honors her spirit, not insults it." For the next 3 days, Ibrahim worked discreetly, sending informants and gathering information. What he discovered was a story that moved even his experienced heart. Layla had been the daughter of a modest but respectable merchant. She had married for love a young carpenter named Khalid, and together they had built a simple but happy life. When Omar was born, their joy was complete. But then, fate struck cruelly. Khalid died when a poorly secured pile of wood fell on him at the market. Layla was widowed at 32, with a small child and no means of subsistence. Our in-laws blamed her for Khalid's death, claiming she had distracted him from his work with her demands. They threw her out without giving her any of the inheritance that was rightfully hers. Her own family had died years earlier in an epidemic. She was completely alone. But Layla didn't give up. She worked at anything she could find, washing clothes, cleaning houses, helping at the market. She never asked for charity, only opportunities to work. And despite her own poverty, she was known in the neighborhood for helping others when she could. She shared food with needier neighbors. She cared for other women's children who had to work. She taught reading to anyone who wanted to learn, using the few skills her father had taught her. "She's loved in her community, my lord," Ibrahim reported. "They call her the mother of the neighborhood, even though she's younger than many of the women there. They say she has a heart of gold." "A heart of gold," Rashid repeated softly. "Yes, that's exactly what she has." Ibrahim also discovered something else. Layla was about to lose her house. She owed 3 months' rent, and the landlord, a rich and unscrupulous man named Malik, had threatened to evict her if she didn't pay everything owed within a week. The 10 coins she had given Rashid were all she had managed to save, and it wasn't even enough to cover 1 month's rent. "And the boy, Omar," Rashid asked. "He's as remarkable as his mother, my lord. Despite his poverty, he's one of the best students in the lessons he receives. His teacher says he has a natural gift for mathematics and poetry. But without resources, without connections, his potential will likely be wasted." Rashid felt an iron determination crystallize within him. "Ibrahim, this is what we'll do." 5 days passed. 5 days during which Layla desperately tried to find a way to save her home. She worked harder than ever, accepting any task, no matter how humble or difficult, but it wasn't enough. Time was running out. The night before the landlord's deadline expired, Layla sat with Omar after a meager dinner of bread and tea. The boy, sensitive to his mother's worry, took her hand. "Mama, what's going to happen to us?" he asked in a small voice. Layla hugged her son, fighting back tears. "I don't know, my love, but whatever happens, we'll be together. And as long as we're together, we'll find a way to move forward." "Do you think you did wrong in giving your money to that man, Mr. Hassan?" Omar asked. Layla was silent for a moment, thinking about the beggar she had helped days ago. She wondered if he had found some peace with those coins. She hoped so. "No, my love," she finally responded. "I don't regret it. That man needed help, and I could give it to him. That's what makes us human, our capacity to help each other. If we lose that, we lose everything that really matters." "But now we need help," Omar said, with a child's simple logic. "Yes," Layla admitted. "And maybe someone will help us, like I helped that man, or maybe not. But at least I'll be able to sleep, knowing I did the right thing." That night, Layla barely slept, worried about what the next day would bring. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of her late husband, Khalid, who smiled at her and told her everything would be all right. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Layla woke early, prepared a simple breakfast for Omar, and mentally prepared herself to face the landlord Malik. Maybe she could convince him to give her more time. Maybe she could appeal to his compassion, if he had any. But when she opened her door, she stood paralyzed with surprise. In front of her door was a crowd, neighbors, merchants, even people she didn't recognize, all gathered in the narrow street. And in the center of the crowd, there was a man dressed in fine clothes, mounted on a white horse. Next to him were several palace guards, their uniforms gleaming in the morning sun. The man dismounted gracefully and approached Layla, who instinctively stepped back, confused and a little frightened. Had she done something wrong? Was she in trouble? "Are you Layla, daughter of Ahmad, widow of Khalid?" the man asked in a formal voice. Yes, sir," Layla responded in a trembling voice. "Have I done something wrong?" The man smiled, and there was something familiar in that smile, though Layla couldn't identify what. "On the contrary, Layla, you've done something extraordinarily right. I'm Ibrahim, vizier of Sultan Rashid. I've come on behalf of His Majesty with a message for you." Layla felt her legs weaken. The Sultan? Why would the Sultan even know of her existence? Ibrahim unrolled a scroll and began to read in a clear voice so all present could hear. "By decree of Sultan Rashid, ruler of these lands, the following is proclaimed. The citizen Layla has demonstrated extraordinary kindness and generosity in times of great personal difficulty. Her act of selfless charity has touched the Sultan's heart and serves as an example of the best of humanity. Therefore, it is decreed that..." Ibrahim paused dramatically, and Layla felt her heart beating so hard she thought everyone could hear it. "First, the house in which Layla currently resides is now her property, purchased and paid for in full by the royal treasury. She will never again have to worry about rent or the possibility of losing her home." A murmur of astonishment ran through the crowd. Layla brought her hands to her mouth, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Second, a monthly pension is established for Layla and her son Omar, sufficient to live with comfort and dignity, which will continue as long as they live." Tears began to run down Layla's cheeks. "Third, young Omar will be admitted to the Royal Academy, where he will receive the best education available in the kingdom, with all expenses paid by the royal treasury." Omar, who had come out of the house upon hearing the commotion, clung to his mother's skirt, his eyes wide as saucers. "Fourth, Layla is offered a position in the royal palace as supervisor of charity, where she can use her compassion and wisdom to help others in need throughout the kingdom." Ibrahim rolled up the scroll and looked at Layla with a warm smile. "In addition to all this, the Sultan wishes to see you personally. He has prepared a carriage to take you to the palace, if you're willing to accept." Layla couldn't speak. Tears flowed freely now, and her neighbors surrounded her, congratulating her, hugging her, sharing her joy. Finally, she found her voice. "I don't understand," she managed to say. "Why? What have I done to deserve this?" Ibrahim approached and spoke in a lower voice, just for her. 5 days ago, you gave your last 10 coins to a beggar. That beggar was Sultan Rashid in disguise. Your act of kindness moved him deeply. He said that in you, he found something he had been searching for, a truly pure heart." Layla felt the world spinning around her. The beggar, Mr. Hassan, was the Sultan. She had given her last money to the richest man in the kingdom. The irony was so absurd, she almost laughed, but she was crying too much. "But I only did what anyone should do," she said through sobs. "Exactly," Ibrahim responded softly. "And that's precisely the point. You did what anyone should do, but very few do, especially when they themselves have so little. The journey to the palace was like a dream. Layla and Omar were taken in an elegant carriage, something neither of them had ever experienced. Omar pressed his nose against the window, marveling at the views of the city from this new perspective. Layla simply sat in silence, trying to process everything that was happening. When they arrived at the palace, they were received with all honors. Servants guided them through magnificent hallways, decorated with exquisite tapestries and golden lamps. Finally, they reached a private room where Sultan Rashid awaited them. When Layla entered and saw the man sitting on an elegant divan, dressed in royal robes, she immediately recognized the eyes she had seen in the beggar's face. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed. "My lord," she began, but Rashid quickly rose and approached her. "Please, stand up, Layla," he said in a gentle voice. "There's no need to kneel. If anyone should kneel here, it's me before you." Layla slowly stood, confused. "My lord, I don't understand." Rashid smiled, and this time Layla could see the sadness in his eyes, a sadness she recognized because she herself had felt it. "3 months ago, I lost my wife," he began. "She was an extraordinary woman who dedicated her life to helping others. Before she died, she made me promise that I would truly know my people, that I would understand their struggles and their hearts. So I began to walk through my kingdom in disguise, seeking to understand." He paused, looking out the window toward the city that extended beyond. "In my travels, I found much greed, much indifference, much selfishness. Even among those who had abundance, few were willing to share. And I began to lose hope in humanity." He turned toward Layla, and his eyes shone with emotion. "But then I found you, a woman who had nothing, who faced losing her home, who had a son to feed, and yet you gave me everything you had, without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. In that moment, I understood what my wife had tried to teach me for years, that true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in what we're willing to give." Layla felt new tears forming in her eyes. "My lord, you did what your heart dictated," Rashid interrupted gently. "And in doing so, you gave me a gift more valuable than all the gold in my coffers. You restored my faith in humanity. You showed me that there's still pure kindness in this world. And for that, I want to make sure you never again have to worry about your survival. I want you to use your gift of compassion to help others as you helped me." Omar, who had been observing everything in silence, finally spoke. "So my mama is a hero?" Rashid laughed, a genuine and warm laugh. "Yes, young Omar, your mother is a hero. Perhaps not the kind who fights with swords or conquers kingdoms, but the most important kind, a hero of the heart." He knelt to be at the boy's level. "And you, Omar, will have the opportunity to become anything you dream of being. The Royal Academy awaits you. There you'll learn from the best teachers in the kingdom. What would you like to be when you grow up?" Omar thought for a moment, his face serious. "I want to be like my mama," he finally said. "I want to help people." Rashid felt a lump in his throat. He looked at Layla, who smiled with pride through her tears and knew he had made the right decision. The following months brought extraordinary changes, not only for Layla and Omar, but for the entire kingdom. Layla accepted the position of royal charity supervisor, but with one condition, that she could continue living in her neighborhood, among the people she knew and loved. The Sultan agreed, and Layla's small house was renovated and expanded, becoming a community center where those in need could receive help. Under Layla's guidance, a new charity system was established in the kingdom. It wasn't just about giving alms, but about creating opportunities. Workshops were established, where people could learn trades. Small loan programs were created to help entrepreneurs. Schools were built in poor neighborhoods. And all of this was done with the philosophy Layla had lived all her life, that true charity isn't just giving fish, but teaching how to fish. Omar flourished at the Royal Academy. His natural intelligence, combined with the quality education he now received, made him one of the most outstanding students. But he never forgot his roots. Every week, he returned to his old neighborhood to teach other children what he had learned, sharing his knowledge as his mother had shared her kindness. Sultan Rashid also changed. Inspired by Layla, he continued his disguised travels, but now with a different purpose. He didn't just observe, but acted. He identified problems and worked to solve them. He listened to his people's complaints and made changes in his policies. Slowly, the kingdom began to transform into a more just, more compassionate place. And every month, without fail, the Sultan visited Layla at her house, not as a ruler visiting a subject, but as a friend visiting another. They talked about philosophy, about human nature, about how to create a better world. Layla became one of the Sultan's most trusted advisors, his voice of reason and compassion. One day, almost a year after their first meeting, Rashid and Layla were sitting in the small garden that had been added to her house. Omar was inside, studying for an important exam. "You know," Rashid said thoughtfully, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found you that day. If I had continued losing faith in humanity. If I had allowed bitterness to harden my heart." Layla smiled softly. "But you found me. Or maybe I found you. Or maybe fate found us both. My wife used to say, there are no coincidences," Rashid said, "that everything happens for a reason." "She was a wise woman," Layla responded. "I would have liked to meet her." "You would have gotten along well," Rashid said with a sad smile. "You both understand something that took me a lifetime to learn. That true wealth isn't measured in gold, but in the impact we have on others' lives." Layla nodded. "And yet, my lord, you've given me so much. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed by your generosity." "No, Layla," Rashid said firmly. "You gave first. You gave me hope when I had lost it. You gave me renewed purpose. You showed me the kind of ruler I should be. What I've given you in return is only a small fraction of what you gave me." They sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the peace of the garden, the birdsong, the gentle breeze. "You know what's most ironic about all this?" Layla finally said. "When I gave you those 10 coins, I thought I was helping a poor man. I never imagined I was helping the richest man in the kingdom." Rashid laughed. "And I thought I was testing your kindness. I never imagined you would be testing mine, challenging me to be better, to do more." "Then we were both tested that day," Layla said. "Yes," Rashid agreed, "and we both passed the test." Years passed, and the story of Layla and the Sultan became legend. It was told throughout the kingdom, passing from generation to generation. It became a story that mothers told their children, that teachers taught in schools, that poets sang in the squares. But more than a story, it became a philosophy, a way of life. "Remember Layla," they told each other when facing the temptation to be selfish. "Remember that true wealth is in giving, not in accumulating." Omar grew up to become a respected scholar and eventually an advisor to the Sultan, following his mother's footsteps in serving the kingdom with compassion and wisdom. He married and had children of his own, whom he raised with the same values his mother had taught him. Layla continued her work into old age, touching countless lives with her kindness. She never became proud or arrogant despite her position. She remained the same humble woman who had given her last coins to a stranger in need. And Sultan Rashid ruled with wisdom and compassion, always remembering the lesson he had learned on a dusty street in a poor neighborhood. That a person's true value isn't measured by what they possess, but by what they're willing to give when they have nothing. When Layla finally passed away, at the age of 72, the entire kingdom mourned. The Sultan, now an old man himself, delivered her eulogy personally. With tears running down his wrinkled cheeks, he said, "Today we have lost one of the noblest souls that ever walked this earth." Layla was not a queen by title, but she was a queen in spirit. She had no riches when I met her, but she was richer than anyone I've ever known. She taught me that the richest test is the heart, and that a generous heart is worth more than all the treasures in the world. He paused, his voice breaking with emotion. She saved me when I was lost. She showed me the way when I was blind. And through her, I learned to be not only a better ruler, but a better human being. Her legacy isn't in stone monuments or words written in books, but in the countless lives she touched, in the hearts she changed, in the world she helped make a little kinder. Layla was buried with all the honors of a royal family member, but her tomb was placed in her neighborhood cemetery, among the people she had loved and served all her life. And on her tombstone, by order of the Sultan, these words were inscribed: "Here lies Layla, who taught a kingdom that true wealth is in the heart. She gave when she had nothing, loved when it was difficult, and believed when others had lost hope. May her example light our way forever." Decades after Layla's death, a young traveler arrived in the kingdom. He had heard of the legend of the woman who had given her last coins to the Sultan and had been rewarded beyond her wildest dreams. But being a cynical man, he didn't believe the story. He thought it was just a fairy tale, a fable invented to teach morals to children. One day, while walking through the Al-Qamar neighborhood, now prosperous and well-maintained, he saw an old man sitting on the steps of a beautiful house. The old man had hair white as snow and deep wrinkles on his face, but his eyes shone with intelligence and kindness. "Excuse me, sir," the traveler said. "Is the story of Layla and the Sultan true? Did it really happen?" The old man smiled, a smile that seemed to contain all the wisdom in the world. "Yes, young man, it happened. I was there. I am Omar, Layla's son." The traveler sat next to the old man, fascinated. "So, your mother really gave her last coins to a stranger?" "Yes," Omar responded, "and it changed the course of our lives and the course of this kingdom." "But," the traveler said, still skeptical, "wasn't it just luck? What if the beggar hadn't been the Sultan? Your mother would have lost everything." Omar was silent for a moment, looking toward the sky. "You know what my mother told me once when I asked her that same question? She told me, 'Omar, kindness is never a mistake, even when it's not rewarded, because the true value of kindness isn't in what you receive in return, but in what you become by giving it.' When you help someone, you become a better person, and that's a reward no one can take away from you." The traveler frowned, processing these words. "My mother would have given those coins even if she had known she would never receive anything in return," Omar continued, "because that was her nature. The Sultan's reward was generous and changed our lives materially, yes, but my mother's true reward was the peace she felt in her heart, knowing she had done the right thing. That peace is priceless." "So," the traveler said slowly, "the lesson isn't that kindness will be rewarded with wealth?" "No," Omar responded firmly. "The lesson is that kindness is its own reward. The material wealth we received was an extraordinary gift, but it wasn't the point of the story. The point is that my mother chose kindness over survival, compassion over fear, generosity over selfishness. And in doing so, she not only changed her own life, but inspired an entire kingdom to be better. The traveler sat thoughtfully. But in the real world, most people who give everything they have don't receive palaces and royal pensions. They die poor and forgotten, perhaps, Omar admitted. But they die knowing they lived with integrity. They die knowing they made the world a little better place. And that, young man, is something no amount of gold can buy. He stood slowly, his old bones creaking. The richest test is the heart. Those were the first words Sultan Rashid said when he told this story publicly. And they're the words you should remember. Not because kindness will make you rich, but because kindness will make you human in the truest sense of the word. The traveler watched the old man enter the house and sat there for a long time, thinking. When he finally stood to continue his journey, something had changed in him. He couldn't explain it exactly, but he felt as if he had received a gift, a truth he had been searching for without knowing it. That night, when he saw a beggar on the street, he didn't look away. Instead, he stopped, shared his food, and listened to the man's story. And though he never became rich, though he was never rewarded with palaces or pensions, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt his life had meaning. And so, Layla's story continued living, not just as a tale, but as a living truth that manifested itself every time someone chose kindness over selfishness, compassion over indifference, love over fear. Because in the end, that was the true magic of what had happened on that dusty street so many years ago. It wasn't that a poor woman had become rich. It was that a simple act of kindness had demonstrated something fundamental about human nature, that even in our darkest moments, even when we have nothing, we still have the capacity to give. And in that giving, we find not only our humanity, but also our divinity. The richest test is the heart, and Layla had passed that test with a grace and generosity that would resonate through generations, reminding everyone who heard it that true wealth isn't found in what we accumulate, but in what we share. In the years that followed, the kingdom prospered not only economically, but spiritually. The policies inspired by Layla created a more just, more compassionate society. And though there were challenges and difficulties, as there always are, the spirit of kindness she had embodied became the foundation upon which everything else was built. Today, centuries later, the story is still told. The details may have changed over time, embellished by poets and storytellers, but the essence remains. A woman who had nothing gave everything she had, and in doing so, changed the world. And every time someone chooses to be kind when it would be easier to be cruel, every time someone gives when it would be easier to keep, every time someone loves when it would be easier to hate, Layla's spirit lives again. Because the richest test is the heart, and a generous heart is the most valuable treasure any person can possess.